Good day and welcome to yet another one of our weekly wraps from Rand Swiss. As usual, what we'll do is we'll cover some of the stuff that happened in the last week or so and discuss how it's going to affect you and your investments going forward. 3 topics this week. We're going to talk about what's happening with the oil market and this oil cap that the Europeans are putting in place. We're going to talk about what's happening with load shedding. By the time this thing comes out, maybe there won't be any lights in South Africa. And finally, we're going to do a deep dive into AI. AI has been an interest of mine for a while, and I think anyone who's followed this knows that. And I think we need to just do a little update on what's happening at the market at the moment, or in that environment at the moment. And it's very interesting. Okay, let's start off. The oil market. The Europeans have decided to put in a $60 cap on oil. The way they're going to put this in is basically by saying that no ship that uses their services, like insurance and so on, is allowed to transport oil if the oil is not going to be sold for less than $60 or $60 a barrel. That is the limit. If you're going to sell oil and you want to use a ship that's going to be insured by the Europeans, basically, you have to make sure that the oil is going to be transported to a place that's only going to be paying $60 a barrel for that oil. That is the thing. And this is one of the most power moves that you can imagine, because effectively you are sanctioning a country, not by having your boats on the water, not by having tanks and preventing them from doing things, but just saying, we're not going to sell you insurance. Imagine that, the power of the European financial system, the Western financial system, by just saying, we're not going to sell you insurance, is enough to stop them from basically exporting. Why is this the case? Well, nowhere is going to allow you to transport oil that if you can basically not provide them with insurance, that should there be a spill, there should there be an accident, that you will pay for it. Okay, can you imagine taking oil through the Suez Canal, or through the Panama Canal, or through the Straits of Bosphorus, which is an important one here, which is controlled by Turkey. And if there's a spill or there's an accident or something happens, the Turks are going to be responsible for fixing it up. They're going to clean their beaches, they're going to do all those kind of things. So you want to have insurance, if you're going to be basically having to deal with this kind of stuff. So any ship that goes past a piece of water that you control, you want to make sure that that basically has insurance in case something goes wrong and you're left with a big bill. If the Russians can't transport, oil via those places that are controlled, for instance, by the Turks or maybe through the Baltics and so on, it's going to find it very difficult to deal with all the oil it's producing. That means it's going to not be possible for it to continue to fund itself the way it was in the past, and there's obviously going to be negative economic effects, a drop in the effectiveness in the war, blah blah blah. Now the Russians don't only have the opportunity to sell to the west, they also have the opportunity to sell to the east. So places like India and China, they can still possibly get oil to them. The question is, these places also want to have some kind of insurance. Now, what would happen here is that the Chinese or the Indians or some other group here might get together and decide to basically provide insurance to the Russians, because insurance is not exactly a rocket science kind of a thing, a high tech thing. It's just a financial service, and the Chinese and the Indians know how to do this. In fact, this might actually be an opportunity for them to get into a market that they weren't really in before. The Europeans have dominated these services markets for a long time for maritime services, and the fact that the Chinese and the Indians now have the opportunity to break into it might be an interesting thing. But here's the thing: if they go out and they basically provide a blanket kind of insurance policy or insurance service to the Russians, they're going to have some trouble. Why? Because what's going to happen is that's going to be an obvious move against Europeans. It's going to say, obviously, we're against you. We're taking action against you. It's an aggressive move. What might get by is that they might be able to get by with a local thing. So instead of Chinese might provide insurance to Chinese ships coming to China, and Indian ships coming to India, with Pakistani ships coming to Pakistan, whatever it may be. But what this does is it further cements my view and my thesis that we are going to be seeing a bifurcation, a splitting of the world financial system. There's going to be a US, Europe, maybe Australia, Japan financial system one end. There might be a Chinese India or Chinese and an Indian system. We are going to see more than one financial system globally, and that's going to make a big impact, I think, in the world in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. It's a real shift in terms of the way the world works. Okay, the next thing is what's happening with Eskom. As I speak to you right now, Eskom is in stage 6 load shedding. Okay, we're talking about the highest it's been. It's something we have not had for a lot of times, but unfortunately the last 2 times have been quite close to each other. Before that there was a big break. It was we had that again before. So what we're seeing is that a really high level of load shedding, and 2 times in a row, or very close to each other, at a previous period where there was none. That's a clear indication that things are going very badly for Eskom. Now, why is this important? Well, the situation in Eskom is deteriorating. It's quite clear. The level of load shedding we've had recently is higher than we've had previously. Okay, the level of issues that the company is having is higher than it's had previously, and there's no trend line that's showing that this is stopping. For all indications, that's getting worse. We could be dealing with maybe 7, 8 level 6, level 8 load shedding down the line. And if the government, also if Eskom doesn't really basically handle the load shedding properly, it basically lets the market or the system go more towards the edge. Apparently, and it's called some, I don't know the physics behind this as clearly as everybody does, as other people do. Maybe some engineers might know this better than I do. But from what I can see from all the experts, if you stress the system enough, what you could be dealing with is a collapse of the electrical grid. That means the power lines stop working because the transformers and all the other stuff that's around there don't work and have been broken in some way to the point at which you cannot transport electricity until you fix those things. That could put us into the dark for a week, maybe longer, depending on when we can access these replacement parts or fix the stuff that's a problem right now. So if we are seeing Eskom in a situation in which it's getting worse, in which we are seeing, previously, very rare levels of load shedding as a more continuous thing or more common, we're getting closer and closer to the point at which we could be seeing the grid under that kind of pressure. And if the grid is under that kind of pressure, the risk to South Africa as a country is gigantic. You have a week without power in the entire country, or for a large segment of the country, not like a suburb or whatever. But you talk about, like, for instance, the whole of Gauteng plus the surrounding provinces, no power. How do you pay for food? How do you transport food? How do you get the petrol to basically be pumped from the pumps? Those are the kind of fundamental, existential problems that we're going to be facing if this doesn't get a solution soon. This is not just like, as much as you complain about load shedding level 6 or complaining about those kind of things, it does not compare to what would happen if the grid had a blackout or collapse. Then we will be talking about inconvenience, but survival, and that is a really scary thought to have at the moment. Fingers crossed it doesn't happen, but we are approaching a point, I think, which that we have to consider those kind of issues. And finally, let's do a deep dive into what's happening right now in AI. AI, artificial intelligence, is a term that's used for machine learning. Computers being able to do things by learning. This is something that I think that has been seen in sci-fi and so on for decades. You've seen robots that can think and talk forever. However, in one way, what they've been predicting is just totally, overpowered, totally out of the realms of what's possible. On the other hand, some of the stuff they've been predicting is just not ambitious enough. The way I'd put it is, look at what the internet was assumed to be in the 1990s. And look at what it is right now. In some ways, it's not as good as what they thought it would be. In other ways, it's significantly better, unimaginably better than what they thought it would be. And the same thing is true with AI as well. Now, in the last few years, there's been a huge uptick in the ability, or the capacity rather, of these machines and these computers, these programs, to do things. Stuff that we were considering as being out of reach for a decade is already been done. It's all news. I'm sure you all know about AlphaGo and the solving of the game of Go and so on. Those are like interesting things. The computers have beaten the best humans at chess for decades now. Gary Kasparov, I think, was the last person that actually had, a competitive match against a machine. Right now, the best chess players in the world have absolutely no chance against the best, or even a reasonably good. It's called a chess program. We talk about a chess program you can put on your phone. The best chess players in the world cannot beat that program. That's how good it is. But we are moving away from towards the edge of games and towards the real world. And what we are seeing right now is more programs using massive amounts of real world data coming up with innovative solutions to problems that we have not seen before. So GPT-3 is a chat program. It's a text program. It generates text. So it makes sentences and paragraphs, etc. up based on prompts you give it. DALL-E, Midjourney, those are things that are text to graphics. We write a little kind of description and it makes a picture based on that description. Okay. There's AlphaFold, which is taken this information about protein molecules and how they fold, and developed a system of actually figuring out what the likely shape of a protein is based on just its composition. So what we are seeing here is real world data, be it pictures, be it text, be it real world physical stuff like proteins, being converted and being analyzed and giving us solutions to problems that we need to basically solve. Now, look at AlphaFold. Previously, it was almost a PhD thesis worth of work to go and solve one of these things. So you take a protein to figure out its shape, it's worthy of a PhD thesis. Something that a PhD student would spend years on. Okay, that's what it was worth. Now, I think in the last year, AlphaFold has uploaded 200 million plus proteins. Basically, every protein on Earth has been uploaded or figured out. It's not exactly right, but it's mostly right. It's far, far more right than you would think. 90+% right in terms of the shape. And this is something that's been done across virtually every molecule on planet Earth, 200 million plus. Remember, I told you this was used to be a couple of years ago, something that only a PhD student or above kind of person would be doing, and for the PhD student that'd be enough to get them their PhD. Okay, so it's a very large amount of work and pretty much solved. DALL-E can make your pictures with anything. Midjourney is the same kind of thing. You go on and you just use them. If you haven't done that before, just Google DALL-E 2 or Midjourney. I think Midjourney charges you a subscription fee after the first 20-something pictures you use. DALL-E I think is free, but you're limited to a certain number of things you can use per month. These are incredibly impressive programs. If you know anything about art, or if you know anything about computer science, this was just something that couldn't even be conceived by people a couple of years ago, and right now it's not just basically in the trial phase, but this is computer programming, so therefore it's very easy to get from trial to commercial use. There's actually a beverage company in Germany that's made its cans design based on prompts from Midjourney. Hot Wheels, Mattel Hot Wheels, those guys that do those cars, are designing new cars based on pictures from these programs. So basically, they're typing fancy car and it's making a bunch of pictures of these fancy cars or cool cars or whatever the prompts are. Cool cars that are red with fancy wheels, and they make a whole bunch of pictures. And Mattel is copying these pictures to make these toys, these Hot Wheels and stuff. This is already happening. In a few years' time, you may be finding that almost nobody's doing graphic design. Why? Because why would you need to? Oh, you want to make a potato chip design. No one asked this guy to make potato chips with some kind of influence of salsa or whatever in there, because that's the flavor. Just say potato chip salsa, poster, and DALL-E will give you something that's really feasible, really useful. You could easily good enough to put on a chip packet or a poster. Something that you'd pay somebody to basically do for you in the past. Okay, and GPT-3, the text one, is even more impressive in a certain way. The chat version came out recently, GPT-3 chat, last week or so, or ChatGPT, how you want to phrase it. That program will talk to you. We can have a little conversation with it. It'll give you basically really interesting ideas if you give it the right prompt. You can ask it, for instance, to write a poem about cats in a space opera, or even things that are stupid like apples on a pie. There's a epic journey of apples on a pie. It'll write you this little kind of synopsis of an idea or a screenplay about these apples. You can say, do a scene with a man and a woman in a restaurant talking about pink cats, and it'll give a little kind of movie scene where it gives you a direction and everything else based on that. Why is this so impressive? Why is I'm so harping on this, right? When the internet was invented, first created, and you find people like David Letterman talking to Bill Gates and say, why would you want this thing? And the guy, Bill Gates, is saying, oh no, you can listen to a radio broadcast or a commentary on a baseball game. And David Letterman says, you could do it on radio. What's the big improvement? Right now, look at what the internet is doing and what it has disrupted. There's whole fields that are no longer existing because of the internet. Travel agents no longer exist. Okay, book now you just go on Booking.com and book stuff. There's whole fields of stuff. Banks are cutting back on branches because doing stuff online. Things like, Airbnb, Google, Facebook, TikTok. If you went back to the 1980s and explained to them that this is one of the biggest companies in the world, they would have they would think you were crazy. It doesn't make sense that they exist as companies. And that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be seeing from GPT-3 and GPT-4, which comes after this, which I can't imagine how good that's going to be. Because the gap between GPT-3 and GPT-2 was gigantic. Between DALL-E and DALL-E 2 was massive. I can't imagine what the next level is going to be like. It's going to be, crazy. Those things are going to create whole new business models. Easy, first up, customer service is going to be totally revamped. Okay? There's no way that we're going to be dealing with customer service in the same way in 5 or 10 years' time. You'll have a conversation with a computer and you would never have any idea it's a machine. It'll be funny, it'll be interesting, it'll be charming, okay? And it'll be a unique conversation that it has with you for the first time, and it'll be a machine doing it and you wouldn't have no idea, okay? With stuff, for instance, like, AlphaFold, that's going to create a whole new set of medicines and drugs, because now that you know the general structure of the proteins, you can do things that kind of target that protein structure and see if it works. Obviously be revised on time, but that's available. There's something called Alpha Tensor, which does what's called matrix multiplication, which is, a simple but basic part of science. And there's these algorithms that he develops about how to do these things faster, which will be hugely, advantageous to science in general. I mean, recently did an update on a program or an algorithm that was being used since the 1960s, and it beat it by a couple steps. Doesn't sound like a lot, but what it does is it makes anyone that uses that, wants to use that kind of calculation a couple % faster, and that'll apply for history. And what comes down to with things like GPT-3 and 4 and so on, is that you're going to be finding this thing intervening in your life in ways that not only you didn't expect, but you don't even know about when it's happening. With GPT-3 and the chat version, you just don't know it's a program. I know people, journalists, that are currently writing articles using it, and it's been a week. It's been 1 week since it's been created, and there are actually journalists right now that are basically getting first drafts out of it. They're basically using it, first draft out from there, and they're basically going to fine tune it here and there, and that's a thing that they're getting paid for as a journalist for writing these words. Okay, so that is a new aspect of the business, the environment that you need to worry about. And before I go, one final thing. What's key about these programs right now versus stuff like AlphaGo and chess and so on. AlphaGo and chess were using a made-up world, the chess board or the Go board or whatever. They use what's called an antagonistic model. What they did was they have two programs fighting each other, and over time the programs learn to be better. You can't really use that for the real world. For the real world, you need real data. And that is the key thing I want to take away from there. Data is going to become incredibly important. The Apple Watches, the Tesla cars, the Fitbit straps, the Google Watches, those kind of things are going to become incredibly useful, not just because of the fact that you're in the ecosystem, because Apple, Google, and Tesla and so on are collecting data about the real world. And you need billions and billions and billions of data points to get a working machine. The more data points you have, the better that machine model is. And you're going to find those that have access to real world data, especially real world data that other people have no access to. Nobody else has access to Facebook's, to Google's, watch data. Nobody else has access to Tesla's car data. That's going to give you an advantage that is going to give you a step up in AI in any of those areas. So look through to Google and to more likely Apple for more medical breakthroughs, and look to Tesla for that stuff about the Optimus Prime, that robot. If anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Tesla, because Tesla is the one that's creating or gathering all the real world data about the physical environment. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Cheers.